Hello, my name's Richard Felix, and I'm going to take you on a haunted tour of Yorkshire. Over the past 9 years, I've been leading ghost tours around some of the most haunted places in England. What better place to start this tour of Yorkshire than here, in the shambles, in the centre of York, one of the most haunted cities in the country. City of ghosts, black phantom dogs, ginnels, snickleways, murders and executions. Some of the stories that you're going to hear are going to be concerning real ghosts, spirits, souls and entities. Others, I believe, are no more exciting than pressing the replay button on a video player. They're nothing more than a recording. I've got an appointment now to meet a gentleman who takes ghost walks around the city of York. He is from the original Ghost Walk of York. So settle back, turn down the lights, give me your full attention, and let me take you on a haunted tour of Yorkshire. And here I am in the centre of York, in front of Treasurer's House. With me this morning is Ray Alexander from the original York Ghost Walk. Now tell me, Ray, is not this the most famous ghost story in the world?
Yes, Richard, I think it is. And Treasurer's House is said to be the most haunted house in York. There's a story to be told about almost every room. But the story I want to tell you now is the most famous of all the ghost stories from York, quite simply because it concerns the world's oldest ghosts. It was 1953, and an 18-year-old apprentice plumber by the name of Harry Martindale was working in the cellar of Treasurer's House fixing some pipes for the central heating. He was standing at the top of a short ladder as he worked, and the only thing that was unusual on this particular occasion was that he could hear some way off in the distance the sound of a trumpet. He said it was a very ugly sound, discordant, rather like an old-fashioned car horn. But he didn't think much about it as he worked, except to wonder how it was that the sound could travel so far under Treasurer's House. But he noticed as time went by that the sound appeared to be getting louder, or perhaps nearer, because a few moments later a Roman soldier stepped through the wall right in front of the place where Harry Martindale was working. Harry Martindale fell off his ladder, he scuttled away into a corner, and he crouched there and he hid, as that soldier was followed by a troop of soldiers. He guessed there were more than 20 of them. He said they emerged through the wall against which he was working, crossed the cellar floor, disappeared through the wall on the other side of the cellar. Later, he was able to describe in great detail everything that he saw, but at the time, he said the only thing on his mind was to keep very still and absolutely silent, because, as he said, if I could see them so close and so clearly, one of them only had to turn his head to see me, and then what would happen? So he didn't move, he didn't make a sound, but he watched. He said the first thing he noticed about these soldiers was that they were very small. Not one of them came up to more than halfway on him. He said they were very shabbily dressed, not wearing what he would have thought was a proper Roman uniform at all. In fact, the only thing that was correct about their uniforms were their helmets. It was only their helmets that he could recognise instantly from history books. He said they were exhausted, as if they'd been marching for many days, with little rest and hardly anything to eat or drink. The second soldier was lying on the back of a great untidy cart horse. Harry wasn't sure whether the man was fast asleep or dead. And the strangest thing of all, he said, was that as they crossed the cellar floor, these soldiers weren't exactly marching across. They appeared to be walking on their knees. He could see nothing of them below their knees. He was asked if he would make this public. He did so. Reluctantly, it must be said, he told the local newspaper. But soon he was being interviewed by reporters from national papers, magazines, radio, television. He always told the story the same way, the way that I've told you now, and they nearly always made a joke of it, because they didn't believe him. And Harry Martindale, who is a very honest and sincere man, was so humiliated by the way they treated him that for many years he refused to tell this story to anyone. But later, a discovery was made that enabled Harry to tell the story with much greater confidence, because under Treasurer's House they found a Roman road. It's called Via Decumana, and 2,000 years ago it headed out of Roman York, Iberacum, as York was called then, towards the north. And as Via Decumana leaves the city now, it runs under Treasurer's House, and it lay just 15 inches, 38 centimetres, below the cellar floor. It means that what Harry Martindale saw was not a Roman army walking on its knees, but the ghosts of Roman soldiers marching on a road that was under the cellar floor.
Wow.
And I've got a bit of good news for you. Treasurer's House is owned by the National Trust. It's open to the public, and you can go there, and even if you wish, go downstairs and have a cup of tea in the cellar.
Oh boy.
Unfortunately. Not the cellar where the haunting occurred. That room, I regret to say, is not open to the public. But with so many other ghosts in Treasurer's House, does that really matter?
Not really. Wonderful. Ray, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure, Richard.
So, tell me, Ray, is York the most haunted city in England?
Well, we don't like to say that ourselves, because it is very much a very proud boast, but we've got no way of proving it. What we like to say is that we have enough stories here in the city to keep us going day in and day out, telling ghost stories to the visitors that come here without having to repeat ourselves. So, as far as we're concerned, we have stories enough. But you see, it's something to do with the nature of the city itself. These wonderful old buildings within the city walls that seem in themselves to store up the very history that's taken place within their walls, and then hold it there in perpetuity, so that at some stage someone else walks into a space like that, and then in the quiet and tranquility of it, play that history back in their own minds. Such as a place like this.
Yeah, it's a little it's a little bit like pressing a replay button, don't you think, on a video recorder?
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And I think it's happened here. Well, Richard, this is Holy Trinity Church, Goodramgate. A marvellous church. I would say if it weren't on the wrong side of the minster, it was within the shadows of it, but it is in fact just a stone's throw from York Minster. Yeah. It has 12th century origins, 13th, 14th and 15th century construction, 14th century painted glass, 16th century box pews. Aren't these wonderful?
Incredible.
It also has a headless ghost. I'll tell you all about it. It's in the graveyard.
Yes, please.
The story starts not too long ago, when a young woman who works in one of the offices in York was having her lunch here in Holy Trinity Church. Now, during the summer months, this is a very popular churchyard, not only for visitors to the city, but the locals. And the locals like to come here to have their luncheon breaks. Well, on that occasion, she was very surprised when she arrived to find that the graveyard was empty. Not a soul. Now, this surprised her because there's usually a few people around, but on this occasion, she had the place to herself. This pleased her because it meant she could have her favourite bench. There's one by a wall with bushes round it, and it means that you can sit there and see most of what's going on in the graveyard without necessarily being seen yourself. She sat down, she started to have her lunch, and then glancing up, she noticed that in fact she wasn't alone. There was a man in the graveyard with her. But the first thing she noticed about him was that he was wearing costume, clothes that would have been worn about 450 years ago in the time of Queen Elizabeth I. And it struck her immediately, perhaps there was some kind of theatrical event going on, or a film or a video, something of that sort. She looked around for the other actors, camera, the crew. No sign of them anywhere, just this solitary gentleman walking around the graveyard. Now, she said that although he had his back to her, she could see that this man was an Elizabethan aristocrat. He had very expensive, well-made clothes. She also said that she had the impression that he was very sad. She said, although she couldn't see his face, it looked to her as though he had every broken heart in the world inside him. He was moving very slowly around the graveyard and appeared to be searching the ground at his feet as he went. He had his head bowed very low. She watched for some time, and then, as he disappeared behind the church, she turned her attention back to her food. But a few moments later, something made her look up. She wasn't sure what it was. It was a sensation, a feeling, an intuition. She didn't know what it was, but it made her look up. And when she did so, she could see that the man had now turned round and was walking directly towards her. She could see also that he wasn't in fact searching the ground with his head bowed very low. He had no head at all. Said to be the ghost of the corpse of a man called Thomas Percy, the 7th Earl of Northumberland. Now he was considered, in the time that he lived, to be a traitor because he was a Roman Catholic, and he lived under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, who was a Protestant. The punishment for traitors in those days was to be executed in public, to have your head removed and then displayed on a wooden pole over one of the gates of the city. This happened to Thomas Percy, the 7th Earl of Northumberland. He was executed on the 22nd of August 1572, and his head was piked over Micklegate Bar. But 2 years later, Catholic sympathisers removed his head and brought it away and buried it somewhere here in the churchyard of Holy Trinity Church. But nobody knows exactly where. But it is because the head was buried with a religious ceremony that the body, which wasn't, is now uneasy. The ghost of the body rises from the place where it was buried and comes here to search the graveyard, looking for the place where the head was buried. Now, people have often asked us if we know where that head was buried, and I must be honest and say, I don't think there's anyone today who can tell you where they buried that head. But I've been in this graveyard on a large number of occasions, and I can tell you from experience that there is one place in this graveyard that is always as cold as the depths of winter. One day, perhaps you'll have a chance to explore for yourself and find yourself in the middle of that cold spot. And it's possible that then you may be standing directly over the buried head of the 7th Earl of Northumberland. But you'll never know, will you? No.
Ray, thanks so much for taking us on a little mini tour of some of the ghostly sites of York. You actually do ghost walks for a living, of course, don't you, here in York?
Yes, I do. I work for the original Ghost Walk of York, and we run a guided tour 365 days a year, each night, from the King's Arms pub at 8 o'clock. Now, the King's Arms pub is very easy to find because it's down on the banks of the Ouse, and it's featured in every news bulletin every time the river floods, so you can't fail but to find it. King's Arms pub, River Ouse by Ouse Bridge, 8 o'clock every night.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, Richard. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the Golden Fleece, or the interior of the Golden Fleece. It's York's oldest coaching inn. And with me, the landlord, Andy Yule. It's reputedly got 5 ghosts. Is that right? Or
allegedly, it'd be somewhere in that region. Yeah, we have. There was a Canadian airman hung himself in one of the rooms.
right?
Each and every day here is like a jigsaw. It's like each and every day there's another piece arrives that makes a bit more sense to other things.
Really?
The Canadian airman in question was having a bad time in his marriage with his wife. She was playing away from home. They gave him a couple of weeks off. During the 40s, York was inundated with Canadians.
Of course, yeah.
They used to drink in the Punch Bowl on Stonegate, Betty's.
Yes, the tea rooms, yes. Yeah.
In fact, many the Canadian airmen were all on much better wages, much better
Of course, yes, indeed.
than any of the English guys were. So a lot of them had diamond rings.
Yeah.
And they used to use the diamonds on the rings to carve the names into the mirror. So if you ever at Betty's, and I forget what the room was called, I think it's downstairs.
Yeah.
You can go, it's still got the original mirror and all the
Good
guys'
Lord.
names are all, they used to carve them in with the diamonds.
Didn't know that.
I think it's broken. I think there's a splay in it, but so we were inundated with Canadians. There was hundreds of them, and this was another popular haunt.
Yeah, for want of a better word.
But this particular guy was his wife was playing away from home. They gave him a couple of weeks compassionate. He'd gone out and got incredibly drunk. Come back and in the morning they found him hanging from one of the beams.
In his bedroom, I presume.
Yeah.
Really?
We have a Scottish family that had stayed with us a few years ago. They come back 2 or 3 times a year. I think they're trying to defeat their own, what's the word? Exercise their own ghosts, for an expression. The girl still has nightmares about it. She must be about 14 now. It was as simple as she'd said something like, "Mum, what would you do if you saw a ghost?"
Yeah.
You know? And Mum was bathing at the time, and Dad said, "Silly, what do you mean?" And she just pointed. And she turned round, there's this guy in full flying gear.
Oh my gosh.
Walking across the room really slowly,
Yeah.
and straight through the wall and away. And Mother's obviously come to terms with it. The girl still has a lot of nightmares about it. And that's in one of the letting rooms, St Catherine's. We get a lot of people say that they've seen things in there, or they can definitely feel a presence all the time. We have a lot of the rooms are quite luxurious. You know, a lot of people come and they, "Oh, this is nice. I'll take a photograph, something to remember by." And we've got 2 or 3 photographs that we've had sent to us where people have gone,
What's that in there?
"What's that?
Yeah.
What was that?" You know. We've had them all verified by Kodak. They actually have a department like that deals with strange photographs.
I didn't realise that.
And you can get any photographs verified by experts at Kodak, because they'll say, "Oh, it was a double exposure, or it was this, or it was that," or they'll go, "Don't know, it must have been there." You know,
Wow.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Gosh. Have you seen anything here, Andy?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things happen. We have a little boy downstairs, and this is what I mean about the jigsaw thing, because if I had £1 for everybody that had come in and said something like, "I've had this calling to come and see you,"
Really?
I'll go, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
So, you're haunted down here, it's a little boy. Or people have been sat there having dinner and they've come over and said, and it always starts with a big grand introduction, everything from like, "I'm a Methodist," or "I'm this," or "I'm that," because people are trying to explain the sensibility of it, or they're trying to explain how normal they are.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
in case you think
I
I'm
know.
mad,
Yeah.
while I've been sat here, I've experienced this, or I can feel this. And if I had £1 for every time that happened, I could have retired.
Wow.
It's been phenomenal. So, like I said, each and every day, I never know what's coming through the door. I don't know what people are going to say to me next. So we've picked up on this, that there is a little boy.
Yeah.
He's very mischievous. He does things to get attention.
Yeah. Poltergeist, does he throw things and move things? Yeah.
Yeah, he does things for attention. It's like, apparently he finds it funny and amusing that it annoys people, but he does it to get a bit of attention.
Yeah.
I've seen things like this, the salt pot, not so much drop off a table, like whoops, but like literally I've seen them 12, 15, 20 foot and smash against the wall.
Good grief.
And when that happens, it's a bit scary, because you kind of find yourself looking around.
Who did that sort of
And
thing?
there's no one anywhere near the table. It's like it could not possibly have been an accident. Somebody hasn't fallen and nudged something.
No.
It's literally just.
Do you see him? Or do you only sense him and he only throws things around? Because he is a true poltergeist, if that's the case.
For many, I saw him for the first time last week.
Oh, really?
Because I had an impression he was around about 10, 11, 12, that kind of thing. Just had that feeling he was about that. Apparently, we had what would it be? Someone that contacts the dead.
Yeah, a medium or...
A girl from Stranraer came here to stay with her family, and she was trying to get a few days away from everything. She said there was that much going on here that she couldn't.
Good
she
Lord.
couldn't help but feel drawn into it. And she told me a little bit more about him. She told me his name was Tim. This was new to us.
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
That we knew about the little boy.
Yeah.
But she told us he'd been killed in an accident with a coach and horses.
Good Lord.
And he'd been run over and trampled to death.
In the yard outside or...
Possibly, or just in that downstairs area, which would have been an entranceway.
Yes, of course.
During the 16th, 17th.
In 1927, a young lad called Tom Gaunt was here at North Landing with his father. They'd come out from Scarborough on a sketching expedition. Tom was in this cave and he took a photograph with his little camera. When he had it developed, he noticed that there were 2 figures standing on the photograph. In 1909, a fishing vessel called the Gleaner was out here from Flamborough. It was during a very bad winter storm. The boat was hit by a very large wave and floundered. Valiantly, another vessel, the two brothers, came to the rescue of the crew of the Gleaner and picked them up. But unfortunately, the storm worsened and the two brothers was also overturned, with the loss of all 6 of the people on board. 4 of them were buried in the local churchyard, but 2 of the members of the crew, Robert Cross and Meliquai Chadwick, were never found. And it's believed that the photograph that Tom Gaunt took 18 years after that tragedy are the ghosts of those 2 tragic seamen that still haunt North Landing to this day. And it's a very cold, wet, windy day in Scarborough. And I'm here at Scarborough Castle because it's got ghosts. It's got more than one ghost. The ghost of Piers Gaveston is reputed to haunt this castle. He was a personal favourite of King Edward II. They were lifelong friends. The barons were very much against Gaveston, who was a Gascon, and also against Edward II. And the 2 of them fled north. Gaveston was besieged here at Scarborough Castle, and he was captured by the barons and taken to Warwick Castle. Before he left here, he was promised a safe conduct, but unfortunately he was tried at Warwick in the Great Hall and was beheaded 1 mile from Warwick at a place called Blacklow Hill. Now, the strange thing is that Gaveston is supposed to haunt this place. He's seen on frequent occasions peering longingly from one of these windows. But why should he haunt this place if he was killed near Warwick? No one knows. Perhaps it's just that a man answering the description of Gaveston has been seen here, or perhaps he haunts this place because this is where he was promised a safe conduct and of course didn't get it. There's another ghost here, or ghostly occurrences here. Over here is the Roman signal station, and not exactly a ghost has been seen here, but there is a photograph that was taken by one of the English heritage keepers here, and there is a strange white glowing orb or ball that's been seen floating above the stone walls, the old Roman part there. And one of the ladies actually here today told me that she has seen that photograph, and she says it is the strangest thing she's ever seen. But there's a new theory that some of these orbs that are seen are actually the first manifestation of a ghost. Everyone expects ghosts to look like monks with hoods and fangs and strange things like that, but apparently they're not, and it is believed that these strange orange and white orbs that are seen in many places are in fact ghosts. But it's still daylight and we haven't seen anything here today. I hope that you can hear me above the howling wind. It's a cold, wet, rainy day. And at the back of me here, Whitby, the ghost hunter's paradise. There's a ghost of a man called Hob that leaps out in the middle of the road and causes motorists to swerve. He also mischievously turns the signpost round. There's another ghost called Goosey, a man that took on a bet to eat a whole goose in one session, and for some reason he was subsequently murdered. But what that has got to do with eating a goose, I'm not so sure. There's a coach and four that thunders along Green Lane, heads to the top of the hills here and plunges over the top of the cliffs into the sea. Probably the most famous ghost is the ghost of Whitby Abbey, St Hilda, and they say that she can be seen summer and winter standing in the topmost window of Whitby Abbey, dressed in a shroud. But an even more tragic ghost at the Abbey is the ghost of Constance de Beverley, who decided that she wanted to marry, although she was a nun, a knight called Marmion. She was, of course, not allowed to do it. She was taken to one of the cells at the Abbey and bricked up. And they say that her lonely ghost still wanders to this day around Whitby Abbey. The Abbey, of course, was also used by Bram Stoker when he wrote Dracula, the blood-sucking vampire. It's reputed that when the ghastly Count came to this country, to England, they say that he landed here at Whitby. And here I am at Burton Agnes Hall in Yorkshire. And of course the hall has a ghost, otherwise we wouldn't be here. It's the ghost of Catherine Anne Griffith. The house was built in the 1600s by her father, Sir Henry Griffith. Anne took a great interest in the building of the house. When it was completed, she said that this was one of the most beautiful houses in England. She was sublimely happy and lived here with her family. Early in 1620, she was visiting a family called the St Quintans, about a mile away from here, and she was attacked by a robber near St John's Well, near the church. She was badly beaten, and she was found in a pool of blood and brought back here to the hall. She lingered for a few days, quite delirious, and she died here at the hall. But before she died, she asked if a part of her could forever remain within the walls of the hall. And she asked if her head could be cut off and put into the house. Those wishes were not complied with, and she was buried in the churchyard just to the left of the house. Within days, her ghost started to walk in the house. It caused much consternation with the family. They brought in exorcists, and they actually had the body exhumed. The coffin was opened. The body, of course, was still intact, but the head had lost all its flesh and had become just a skull. They had the head cut off and they brought it back into the house, and for many years it had pride of place in the Great Hall. But of course, people working in the hall disliked having this strange memento in the house, and it was thrown out of the house. On one occasion, it was actually thrown out by one of the servants and put somewhere in the old Norman manor house. The skull started to scream. Poltergeist activity started to happen in the hall, and they decided the best thing to do would be to rebury it, to give it a decent burial. But every time that skull was reburied, the ghost walked. It started to scream, and poltergeist activity happened more and more in the house. Someone then walled up the skull somewhere inside the hall. Nobody knows where it is to this day, but every so often things happen. Footsteps are heard along the landings. Icy coldness in some of the rooms. And whilst here today, I was talking to one of the workmen who has worked here for 59 years. And he said although he was a disbeliever, he has heard stories of things happening. And they heard footsteps coming down one of the staircases on frequent occasions, and the burglar alarms at the bottom of the stairs, which sensed movement, every so often used to be set off. So he suggested putting in a different sort of alarm that actually sensed heat, because obviously he said if she was dead there would be no heat or warmth. And ever since that's happened, the ghost has never been seen or heard again, and the burglar alarms never go off. Planes are flying overhead, tractors still working the fields. It's hard to believe that on July the 2nd, 1644, a huge battle took place around this monument, the Battle of Marston Moor. Behind me here, the troops of Prince Rupert, the royalist commander, and in front of me, on the hillside, the parliamentary forces, and the trees up there known as Cromwell's Clump. Prince Rupert was leading 28,000 soldiers to relieve York, but he was engaged here in a battle. At the beginning the battle was going well, but after a while a brilliant cavalry charge by Cromwell routed the royalists. Over 6,000 soldiers died around this area. The monument here says Battle of Marston Moor, 2nd of July 1644. Near this site the parliamentary army, left to the leadership of Oliver Cromwell, completed the defeat of the forces of Prince Rupert. Those soldiers are buried in huge unmarked graves around here, and on frequent occasions people say that they see the battle being refought as the sun sets in the evening. Phantom soldiers are seen flitting about. The sounds of cannons and drums are still heard. Now, this is a theory, if you like, but I believe that these soldiers that are still seen aren't really ghosts at all, but a recording of that battle. It's to do with tragic, traumatic, premature death, murders, suicides, and of course battles. The number of people that died, probably before their time, means that the energy which was used by the body in resisting death means that that event that happened just before death can be recorded sometimes into the fabric of a building, but in this case possibly into the soil, and then either on the anniversary or when the atmosphere is similar, then for some strange reason it's released and certain people see it again. It's a bit like pressing the replay button of a video player. But I really don't think that the people that are seeing those apparitions are seeing ghosts. It's just purely and simply a recording of a very tragic event that took place here on July the 2nd, 1644. I'm up above the River Swale in Swaledale, sitting in the haunted Punch Bowl Inn with a refreshing pint of Yorkshire bitter. Black sheep, how appropriate. There's a 12-mile road stretching all the way to Grinton Church, known as the Coffin Road or the Corpse Way. Anyone who died within a 12-mile radius of this area had to be brought to Grinton Church if they wanted to be buried in consecrated ground. Before the funeral procession set out, usually from the house of the deceased, all the guests, family and friends would arrive at the house, biscuits would be distributed and ale before setting off on the journey. It could be anything up to 2 days from wherever they lived to get to the church. They would lift the coffin, the pallbearers of course would carry the coffin, people would take it in turns as they took the long slow journey along the valley, along the corpse way. On the way of course they would have to stop for rests, and there are various stones and places where the coffins were put down, and one such stone, known as the Coffin Stone, at Ivelet Bridge, where a haunting takes place. The stone, strangely enough, is in the shape of a coffin, and it's where the coffins apparently were laid. But there is the story, not of a human ghost, but of a large black dog, a bar guest or padfoot, which for some strange reason takes the shape of a dog rather than that of a person. It has red staring eyes, huge feet and fangs, and it has been seen leaping over the parapet of Ivelet Bridge, but there's never a splash when it lands in the water. The funeral cortege would continue along the valley, and for the night would stop in the little hamlet of Blades just up the hill from here. The body would be stored in what was called the Dead House, and then the family and friends would come down here to the Punch Bowl for the wake, and then return back up the hill to sleep the night, to stay with the coffin. They would then continue the slow journey to Grinton Church, where the coffin would be interred with all due pomp and ceremony. And of course, the reason we're here in the Punch Bowl is because it has ghosts. And Lorraine, you're the landlady of the Punch Bowl, and you've got ghosts, yes?
Well, so they say. I haven't seen any, but there's things goes on, lights keep getting
You've not
on.
been here very long, of course,
Just
have
a
you?
year.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the story?
Well, there's an old doctor who was here, for a Holly Street doctor in the 70s, when all creatures great and small were going. He used to have the Punch Bowl, and then he died I don't know how long ago, but he's buried in the cemetery next door. And he's supposedly to walk through the long room, which is the room next door, with his bottle of port.
He was a port drinker,
yes,
was he?
Buried with his bottle of port as well.
Oh, you kidding?
Yeah, so...
Wow.
But we haven't seen anything, but things goes on, noises and lights getting switched on. And the dog's barking when there's nobody there.
Do the dogs is there anywhere that the dogs won't go, or do they sort of stop and look?
They stop and look.
Really? Staring and looking at someone
stay.
that human eyes can't see for some reason?
Yes, do that quite often.
Really?
Especially when there's nobody in the place, when there's no residents in, and there's only us here. They do that quite often.
Crikey. And of course, you see the light situation, when it happens once or twice, you think, oh, someone else must have left the light on them, but because when it keeps happening, that's when you start to think.
Yeah, well, the housekeeper who does all the rooms, she'll say the same thing. They've been up and switched all the lights on again when there's nobody being in.
Really? Or so. But you personally, yet, haven't seen anything?
No, haven't seen anything.
Does it bother you?
No, not really.
No, I suppose not. I suppose
No, it doesn't
living
bother.
up here in the wilds, I suppose that's the least of your worries, isn't it, ghosts?
Yeah, no, it doesn't bother us.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Down below you can see the Punch Bowl. Up here at the top I found the Dead House. We wondered whether we'd ever make it, but it's not every day that you're in the middle of the North Yorkshire moors and in front of you is a building called the Dead House. So undaunted, I'm going on because I'm going in it. And I found it. It's taken us nearly half a day, but we wouldn't give up. I knew it was somewhere around here, right at the top of the hill, and I'm now, for the first time, approaching a dead house. This is it. Ooh, there's a strange, I don't know, feeling of unease. You imagine, probably since medieval times, the number of bodies that have actually been stored in this building. As far as I know, there are no ghost stories to do with this actual building, but I'll tell you, there's a strange feeling in here. If I was out here on the moors and this was the only place around, I wouldn't stay the night in here. Definitely not. In fact, I'm off. And this is it. Rather wet, slippy trackway, but this is the original Coffin Road. 12-mile stretch. Just been up to the dead house. The body's been deposited there for safekeeping for the night, and the mourners are now trudging along this pathway as they did for hundreds and hundreds of years, down to the wake at the Punch Bowl Inn at the top bottom of the hill here. And this is the parapet on top of the bridge at Ivelet. The mourners with the coffin still had another 7.5 miles to go before they got to Grinton churchyard. This is the haunted bridge where the large black dog with saucer-sized red staring eyes was seen on frequent occasions, but not for at least 100 years, actually leaping over this bridge. And folks that saw it said that it never splashed. It just disappeared from view. And that's it. I've reached Journey's End. This is the end of the 12-mile Swaledale Coffin Road. It ended here at Grinton Church. The mourners, the pallbearers would come in here and lay down their burden for the last time. The wicker coffin, and of course the body would then be buried somewhere in the churchyard in a linen shroud. And then the mourners would start the long journey all the way back along the trail. Up until the 1600s, people were allowed to be buried in linen shrouds. But after that, the government brought out a law stating that all people should be buried in woolen clothes or woolen shrouds. This was to help the ailing woolen industry in this country. And a lead miner here at Grinton was prosecuted and fined £5 for allowing his daughter to be buried here in the churchyard in a linen shroud. £5 was a lot of money in those days, and they say that the ghost of that lead miner still haunts this churchyard. And I'm here in Richmond, North Yorkshire. Richmond Castle, built in 1071 by Alan the Red, a kinsman of William the Conqueror. And behind me here, the Drummer Boy's stone. It says, according to legend, this stone marks the spot where the Richmond drummer boy reached in the tunnel supposed to lead from Richmond Marketplace to Easby Abbey. Here the sound of his drumming ceased, and he was never seen again. During the latter part of the 18th century, a group of Yorkshire militia were stationed at the castle. Someone found underneath the castle keep a tunnel. The hole to get into it was too small for a fully grown soldier to go down, so they decided to send one of the young drummer boys down the tunnel. And so that they could follow from the top, they gave him his drum. As he marched along the tunnel, he was drumming all the time, and the soldiers followed the sound of the drumming from above, all the way through the centre of Richmond, somehow underneath the River Swale. And when they reached this point, the sound of the drumming stopped. The little boy was never seen again. And they erected this stone to commemorate that event that happened here. They say that on the anniversary of that event, on a dark winter's night, people walking along this trackway can still hear the muffled, ghostly drum beats of the Richmond drummer boy. And here we are in South Yorkshire, in Sheffield. These are the ruins of Sheffield Manor. This place was the prison of Mary Queen of Scots for over 14 years. And of course, there are ghosts, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But the ghostly activity takes place in the only part of the manor that is still intact, the hunting lodge or the turret house. So we'll get out of the rain, walk across here and go and have a look inside the haunted turret house. And now up the spiral staircase to the top floor of the turret house at Sheffield Manor. Mary Queen of Scots was imprisoned in and around Sheffield for the best part of 14 of the 17 years that she was imprisoned in England, mainly at Sheffield Castle in the centre of Sheffield and here at the manor. She was held here by the Earl of Shrewsbury, Lord Lieutenant for Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, and his wife, Bess of Hardwick. While Mary was here, she had a certain amount of freedom. She was not particularly unhappy here. This was a hunting lodge and is the only intact part of Sheffield Manor. Mary spent many happy hours here, sewing, embroidering and sitting on the roof watching the hunt. And the story is that Mary Queen of Scots still haunts this building. On frequent occasions, the ghost of Mary, a tall woman in black with a white headpiece, has been seen walking in this room, disappearing through this wall, and has often been seen here in the main room with the fireplace here, and here of course a dummy of Mary Queen of Scots. And above the fireplace, this original Tudor fireplace, the coat of arms of the Earls of Shrewsbury. There have been other ghostly occurrences here, poltergeist activity, things thrown around, and it's always been notorious as a very haunted place here in the centre of Sheffield. A group of psychic researchers came here, and there was a story that many years ago, here in this room, there was a very large incense burner in the middle of the floor, in the shape of an imp. It was very heavy, it would take at least 4 people to carry it, and it used to move across the floor. And one night the psychic researchers came in and put a chalk circle round the incense burner. They sealed off the building, locked all the doors. The following morning they came back, and that incense burner had moved bodily out of the circle and was about 3 feet away. As I said, it would have taken at least 4 people to lift that. And I tell you something, there was no one alive in this building that could have done it. And this is the basement of the turret house. The wind's howling outside, the rain's hammering down, and here, rather pleasant display telling the story of Mary's stay here at Sheffield Manor. And in the corner, would you believe it's moved downstairs? An imp-shaped incense burner. I presume this is the one. Let's see how heavy it is. I certainly couldn't carry that. It would take at least 4 people to lift that. And I'm now standing inside the Vesper Gate, opposite Kirkstall Abbey. We're here, of course, because there are ghosts, but we've come in for a pint at the pub and we find that, would you believe, there's a ghost in here. Now, you've not seen it, have you, John?
No, I haven't seen a ghost.
No, but they tell me that there is actually a man that's been seen, an old man, walking around by the barmaid has told me, and he's wearing a flat hat. Now, whether he's Father Abbot or one of the monks, nobody knows, but things have happened to you, haven't they?
Well, I've been here when things have happened.
Really?
When ashtrays have shattered.
Yeah. What, just blown up, or?
Just completely shattered on the table.
Nobody's knocked them off and they've fallen off?
No.
No?
No, it's all still been on the table.
And nobody near it?
Nobody near it, no.
And what, when you say shattered, I mean just bang and it's...
Yeah, all in little pieces on the table.
Really? While you were watching?
Well, while we sat there,
Yeah.
we didn't actually see it.
No, of course not. It's only when they go bang, I suppose, that you...
That's right, you look round.
Crikey. And it's... Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the sort of ashtray?
Yeah, big glass ashtrays.
They're a bit big and a bit... They don't
A
just...
bit solid, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
What makes them crack, I don't know.
Poltergeists.
I don't know.
Yes, I can assure you. That's it. It's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And what better place to finish this tour of haunted Yorkshire than here in Leeds at Kirkstall Abbey. This Cistercian abbey, built in 1152, is still one of the finest preserved medieval abbeys in England. And of course, it's haunted. It has the ghost of what they believe to be a Father Abbot that wanders around the cloisters of the place. But he's faceless. But you'd imagine a place like this to be much more haunted by ghosts of people, abbots and things that have gone on in the past. But would you believe that the real haunting here is that of a dog? A real dog. Not a bar guest, not a padfoot, not a dog with red staring eyes, but an ordinary dog that haunts the area around the abbey. Because for many, many years, people have exercised their dogs in the grounds of Kirkstall. And many, many years ago, a man with his dog was walking in the trees and he was murdered. And they say that his faithful dog stood with the body all night, wailing and howling. And they say that you can still hear that dog. Many people have actually been interviewed by the local newspapers. And one lady who was interviewed, who actually walked her dog and was a witness, she heard the howling on frequent occasions. And it was suggested to her that this dog was nothing more than any old dog that was howling at sunset, as they do. But she said, oh no, not that howling. That was not any old dog, she said. That was the phantom dog. And so I leave you here in Leeds. Yorkshire's a very large county. We've covered quite a bit of it, but there are lots more stories to tell. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do sleep well, don't have nightmares, and we'll be back. Hello, my name's Richard Felix, and I'm here at my base at the old county jail in the centre of Derby. This place over the last 150 years has been a place of terror, torment, and of course death. And that's one of the reasons why this place is as haunted as it is. I've chosen Derby as the catalyst for the national ghost tour of Great Britain. Over the last 10 years, I have taken in excess of 95,000 people on a ghost tour somewhere around the Midlands. And of course, have spoken to many of those people on the tours, and of course have realised just how fascinated people are by ghosts. This is the reason that we have chosen to do this tour. The video that you've just watched is a part of that series, but I want your help. If you have a ghost story, then please either email me or write to me at the address that you'll see at the end of this video. Of course, you must remember that after speaking to so many people, I think I have an ability to be able to see through some of the stories, to be able to differentiate between a story that is true or a story that's made up. And of course, you must remember that 8 out of 10 ghost stories can be explained. But it's the other 2 that you've got to worry about. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do sleep well and don't have nightmares.